It's saying preparing.
Okay. Okay, good morning. This
Good
is
morning.
Tara. There's Rebecca. Hello, good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning.
And we are Canada Reads American Style, and we have a special episode this morning. So a friend of ours, Jolene, Bookworm Adventure Girl on YouTube, and Lindy of Lindy Magpie Reads hosted they're doing a special project in which, based upon the New York Times top 100, I believe it was, books of the 21st century, Jolene and Lindy decided to put together a top 10 of Canadian lit. Top 10, but it ended up being more, sorry, a top something of Canadian lit. I think they ended up with 67 books on their list because they
Yeah.
sent it out to fellow YouTubers, Instagrammers, friends, authors, asking for their top 10, right? And then from that, they compiled a list based on votes. I think they came up to 67. Rebecca is going to put links to both of their videos so you can see their discussion and what the books were, because it's super fun to watch the
Yeah.
books and like tick off ones that you've read or go, oh, I want to read that. So having said all that, Rebecca and I participated and sent in our top 10, and we are sharing them today.
And we just mentioned too how many of the 67 on their list we've both read, because I thought that was kind of fun too to
Yeah,
see where we stand, where we stand with our CanLit reading. So do you
yeah.
want to say what your number was?
I can't remember it exactly. I think I was around 51 or 50,
Yes.
right? 51. Yeah, 51. So I was pretty happy with that. And I realized that the majority of the books that I may have missed, well, there were a couple that I hadn't heard of. And the ones that a lot of the ones that I hadn't read happened in those like early birth years of my two kids when I was like kind of oblivious to everything going on in the outside world except reading the Outlander books pretty much. So,
But
and
I just want to give a shout out to myself
yeah,
because I said to you, I when I saw the list, I said, I'm gonna guess you're in the high 40s or maybe I said the high 40s or low 50s, and you were at
yeah,
51.
you
So
were
I was like,
spot on.
I
Yeah,
was.
yeah, you were
So I was
spot
proud of
on.
myself for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my number was 23. So I've only concentrated on Hamlet for since 2019. So
Mhm.
my list, when I was asked to compile my list, I literally just went back to my Goodreads and started looking at all my favorite books.
Yeah,
And so I thought 23 was,
yeah.
respectable
No, that's very
for
respectable.
a new Canlit reader. So
Yeah,
yeah,
because these books went back to 2000 that were on the
yeah,
list, right?
yeah,
So considering you've only been reading for 5 years, like focusing really on CanLit, oh, I thought
yeah,
23 is an excellent number.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm very proud
Oh,
of myself, actually. So now I feel like other ones minus the 23, I have a huge, backlog of great Canadian titles to read because
yeah,
I love that they put this project together and it gives a lot of us something to shoot for, which I think is really
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think in their video, they said they have altogether, so they highlighted 67 books on their list based on how many votes, like they capped it at a certain amount, but they've received, I think, over 300
Wow.
books. Yeah. So I would love to see that list actually.
Oh, okay. So we're putting out a little thing
Yeah.
to them to say, please let us know what the other ones were because
Yeah.
I'll bet you I bet you we've read many of those as well.
Yeah. Or
They
maybe
think,
not. Like maybe there's like a whole bunch of new ones there that we haven't even heard of or something, right? That's a lot of books.
well, plus I think for us to ask us for our top 10,
Mhm.
obviously there are so many more we would have added,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so I think that we might have, if we ever do see that list, I'll have to guess how many I think you've read because I want to see if I can get close
Good place.
again. Yeah,
Good
because
place.
you're just such a Canlit reader. I mean, you're like, you know how they say the goat? You're the goat for
I,
Canlit, I
I
think.
No, I think Lindy's the goat that did the project with
Oh,
Elaine,
really?
or with Elaine, sorry, with
Oh,
Jolene. Because
oh
I
yeah.
think Lindy had 63 books that she'd read of their top 67.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So that was pretty impressive too.
Yeah,
So, man.
yeah.
Okay.
I can be
So
the
do
Disney goat.
yeah. Well, you're my goat. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you. I love
Oh,
goats. I'll go with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about our top 10.
Okay.
So
You want to start?
I'll go first just
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
looking at this book, one of my all-time favorites. I'm telling you, I feel like this really solidified for me in many ways, like just totally wanted to read CanLit, and that is From the Ashes by Jessie Thistle. I mean, this memoir is one of the best memoirs I've ever read. And it's so funny too, because following from the time it was published, it was just on the best nonfiction or memoir list in Canada. It just continues to be on a top
Yeah.
like list 10 or 20 or whatever. So that's my number one choice. And I should say these are just in whatever order they are, but I really wanted to start with that one first because it really kind of kicked off for me really being passionate about CanLit.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, because I think that book is still on the top 10 for nonfiction in Canada. It's
Yeah.
been a long time. Yeah,
Mhm.
amazing book. Good start. I'm going to start with a memoir as well. Also, mine are also in no particular order, but I am choosing Care of by Ivan Coyote, which is one of my favorite books. I can't remember the year it was published, the last couple of years. And I think he wrote it during COVID, and it was in response to letters that he had received. Because in addition to being an author, Ivan is also a performer. So he travels quite a bit and does live performances. And through their performances and writing, he connects with a lot. I think a lot of people connect with him and his experiences, life experiences. So he receives a lot of fan letters, but rarely has time to respond to them. And this was his chance to respond to a lot of them, and they're beautiful. I love this book. I think this is the book I think if I could ask everyone to read, if I could be on Canada Reads, this is the book I would go with. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love this book.
I
So,
love that book too.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was funny again. Picking a top 10 was difficult, but
Oh,
if I
yes.
had to pick a top 100, that would have made my
Yeah.
list for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. My next one is again a nonfiction. In fact, it was kind of funny because I was like, I have a lot of nonfiction on mine, I think, or maybe more than most people's top 10.
Mhm.
But y'all know I love nonfiction. So, of course, Seven Fallen Feathers by Tanya Talaga. And this one was difficult to read. I remember starting it and then having to set it aside because it was just such a harrowing tale. And just it's about seven high school students in the Sudbury, Ontario area, or no, Thunder Bay, I think it is. Anyway, they go missing, and it's really about how what their lives were like, how their deaths or their missing. I don't think they found them all, but they it didn't there wasn't a compelling desire or need by law enforcement to find these young people. And it's just a harrowing tale. Most people probably have read it by now, but if you haven't, pick it up. And I will say, I did interview Tanya all those years ago. And to this day, that is still the top downloaded episode that we have on our podcast is that interview with Tanya. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Two good choices. Yeah. If I had a top 12, I think those would both been on.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, book two is from one of my favorite authors, and it is Galore by Michael Crummey. So Michael Crummey's from Newfoundland. And this book is set in Newfoundland, as are all of his books. And it's about what's the character's name? I think it's Jonah or something like that. Maybe it doesn't even matter. Anyways, a stranger arrives in this little outport in Newfoundland. This was in the past, so when fishing was the main occupation and when life was very isolated. And he arrives because he is spit out of well, he's not spit out, he's cut out of a whale's belly. And there's a little bit of like mythology to it, and it's the story of this outport, the people in this outport, their life, and their reaction to this stranger coming into their lives. I love this book. I've read it a couple times. I love this book.
No. I didn't even I mean, I only heard of it because of you, but I didn't know that's what the storyline was. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one I don't actually have a copy of it. I thought I owned it, but I guess I got it through the library when I read it. It was on the long list for Canada Reads. I don't remember what year it was, but it's The Boy on the Beach by Tima Kurdi. And it's about Syrian refugees, and it's about this boy who had washed up on a shore, and it made worldwide news. And Tima is related to this. I think it was her nephew. And it really is about the Syrian refugee crisis. It was just such a beautiful, painful, amazing tale. And I felt like because it was on the Canada Reads long list, I felt like it should have been on the short list. And I feel like if it had been on the short list, it would have won that year. So that's all I want to say. I don't remember who won that year. I don't remember. But I just love that book so much. And in fact, we also interviewed Tima Kurdi, and I was so moved by everything she had to say. I actually donated to, she had a foundation, and I donated money to it as well, because I just felt like what they were trying to do in helping families. And I mean, literally, they were just buying things like diapers or whatever. And she would travel to Syria and she would take these donations and stuff. So if you haven't read it, which I don't feel like a lot of people necessarily were really familiar with the book, but it's The Boy on the Beach by Tima Kurdi.
Right. Okay. Another one. This will not surprise you, Rebecca, although you know my list anyways, but I don't think you would have been really surprised by anything on my list. Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. Also, again, it was on, and it won Canada Reads a few years ago when it was on Canada Reads. This is Joshua's first novel. I think he wrote some poetry prior to this, but this was his first novel about Johnny, a young sex worker who needs to get back to his home on the reservation for a funeral, and how he gets there. And I fell in love with this character. He remains one of my favorite fictional characters.
He kind of broke my heart. I love Johnny so much, and he kind of broke my heart.
I know. Yeah. I know. Fantastic book.
All right. So my next book, again, nonfiction. Da, 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 da. I've talked about this book so many times. I'm not going to bore you about it again. And Tara's going to back me up how much I enjoyed this book, because I think she liked it too. Adam Shoalts, Where the Falcon Flies. And this one, again, what I love about it is, if you've not read Adam Shoalts before, to me, this is his most accessible for anybody. Like, I love his books. I love geography. I love everything he does, his adventures, etc. But this one has history and adventure, and you're going to be sitting on the edge of your seat again with reading about him. And like Tara said in one of our videos or one of our podcasts recently, hey, we know he survived, which is a good thing, because when you're reading it, you're sitting there going, oh my God, oh my God. But you know, since he wrote the book, he survived. So yeah. I love that book.
It's a great book. I just, within the last week or so, just finished it. I loved it.
And I had said on the podcast, the part that freaked me out the most was when he was going up this St. Lawrence River. And I had said to you, you hadn't gotten there yet, but that whole experience of I can't even imagine those freighters, etc. I like, oh my God, that really freaked me out.
Yeah, that one. And anytime he ran into any kind of rough weather while paddling, because I haven't paddled a lot, like I haven't done a lot of canoeing at all, but I've had a few times. And again, when I've done it, it's been on a much smaller lake than what he is on. And I've had a couple of times when we've run into like any kind of waves or something, and it is terrifying, that feeling that you may not get back to shore, that you're like, I don't know if I can get back to shore. It's terrifying. And I couldn't imagine being on a great lake or something. And
I just have to tell you, yesterday, my little Sidonia and I, we went out, did this little boat tour thing on it's St. Clair River and then Lake Huron. And there were times when there was just a little bit of waves or whatever. And I have to laugh. And I was thinking to myself, I do not know how people are on like kayaks or whatever. And this is just like mild stuff. I am just a chicken. I could not do any of what he does. He's amazing.
Yeah, me too. I'm just going to read about it. I'm just going to read about it.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. My next one, Crow Lake by Mary Lawson. Was this the first Mary Lawson that we read together, or was that Town of Solace maybe the first one?
I think Solace is the first one we read together.
So this would have been our second, and we both love Mary Lawson. We've read 3 of her books now, you and and I think we have a 4th one. There's one more. I think she has 4.
Yeah.
I chose this one. I probably could have chose any of them because I just love her writing, and I love the world that she creates and her characters, and I just love her. So I wanted her on my list because when I was going through my books and the ones that how I chose them, generally it was I had some kind of like strong emotional reaction to the book in some form or another, and not always a pleasant one, like, but this was pleasant. This was like the emotional reaction I want in a book, and so I had to put her on there.
Yeah, and it's funny too because Mary Crow was one of the first. I think she was really like the second Canadian author, because I had kind of started reading before Canada Reads, and I think she was the second Canadian author, because I just like sort of Googled like great Canadian authors or something like that, and she came up, and I read one of her books and absolutely loved her style and everything, because again, they're kind of quiet novels about people, real people that you feel connected to. And I couldn't pick which one to talk about. So that's why if I had to pick 10 top authors, then I would pick her. Yeah.
Well, that would be an interesting.
We should do that.
Yeah, we should.
Let's do that. I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down so I don't forget.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Well, you know what's really funny? It just dawned on me that I thought, I have interviewed Jessie Thistle, Tanya Talaga, Tima Kurdi, Adam Shoalts, and I interviewed Michael Christie.
That's right.
And I have to laugh. I have probably said many times how much I don't like to read big, thick books. And this is a big, thick book to me. I could not put this book down. I read it so quickly, loved everything about it. And when I asked if I could interview him, I was so nervous. And he said yes. And I have to say, he's one of the authors, like there might be like 2 or 3 that I just freaked out internally while I was talking to them, going like, oh my God, oh my God. He was one of them. He was just the kindest, just most generous, funny, wonderful people. And I loved this book. I loved all the characters. A family saga, which is not necessarily something I would read. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think let's do a little sidebar? I don't know. Anyways, do you think, so I know that you've loved all of these books that you've brought right now, and you happen to have interviewed all the authors, but you loved them before interviewing the authors. But do you think that interviewing the authors like even added to your experience of the book?
Yeah, I absolutely. And that's why I just now, as I was saying, every time I hold up a book, I say, oh, we interviewed them for the podcast. I didn't even think about that, but I think it does, because one of the things I love, and I said this before, like when I first started the podcast, for me, when I read a book, I kind of have to read a little bit about the author. I don't read what the book is about because I like to be surprised 100%. So but I need to know about the authors, because there's something that's comforting to me to just know who are they, where are they from, when were they born, a little bit about them. And so I think that in each case, you get a little bit more insight when you get to ask the questions you might have about a book. And I do often admit that there are times when I ask questions that maybe no one else would ever ask. Not like, oh, you're so smart, but like I want to know the answer. And maybe other people are like, I don't really care about this. But I ask because I am really curious. And so I do treat it often like I'm just having a conversation with this person. And here's what I want to know.
Yeah. You're also you're a people person. You are a complete people person. I I've seen you engage with people that you've just met, like when you met my mother and my aunt, and you instantly, you're like, tell me about yourself. Like you want to know about people. So it doesn't surprise me that also, when you find a favorite book, that you also want to know about the author, and that only enhances your experience.
Yeah. And in fact, it's really funny about that because I do that with everyone. I just had blood drawn a couple days ago, and I was talking to the woman. She's telling me it's her 50th birthday or 40th birthday coming up. She's going to change the color of her hair and her short hairstyle. I talk to everybody. I just am curious, always curious about people.
Yep. Yeah, you are.
Okay. Next
one. And I think this author is on your list, but different book. I'm trying to remember. I might be wrong. Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese. It was the first Wagamese. I haven't read all of his books yet, but I will make my way through his backlist. But it was the first book of his that I've read. I love his writing. It's beautiful. And it was not what I was expecting in terms of where the story went and plot. And it really kicked me in the gut. And anyways, I loved it. I was like, it has to be there. Yeah.
And I saw the movie when it came out. I didn't know it was a book when I saw the movie. I was in Canada one time and I just went to the movies and it was on, and I loved the movie. I thought the actors, they used Indigenous actors, obviously, and they had the character at different ages. All of the ages of the character was amazing. They were amazing. So I haven't read it yet, but I've read 3 of his books, and actually he is also on my list. I had Medicine Walk, and I can only say, having read 3 books so far, and I think because I'm not somebody who picks up a lot, like I don't read back catalog of people. I just don't do that like you do, which you're amazing because you really you do a deep dive into authors, which I really, really respect and admire seriously. But this, I've read 3, and I think he's the first, like that's the most I've read of one Canadian author, I think, is Richard Wagamese. And I definitely want to read all the rest of them. Yeah. But so I would just say Medicine Walk, Quality of Life, I think it was. And can't remember, there's something else I read. Absolutely loved all of them. So you cannot go wrong. Probably most of you, if you're listening, have read him. But if not, rush out right away, read something, because I guarantee you, you will absolutely love it.
Yeah. Who's next? No, me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, this is another favorite book that we both share. I think he's on your list, actually. What Strange Paradise by Omar Akkad. Yeah. We both love this book. I'm not sure if we read it together.
Yeah.
I believe. And then we talked about it for 2 hours. We each brought something different to it to enhance the other person's read. It's beautiful. He's amazing. It's like a fairy tale, but it's unfortunately not a fairy tale of this little boy who washes up on the shore of an unknown country, probably Greece, and his experience as a refugee in this country and trying to find safety. And that's what I'm going to say. It's beautiful. I will say too, if you haven't read it, at the beginning, he has a couple of quotes right here. Read them beforehand and then go back and read them again when you finish the book. And then if one of them you're not sure of, DM Rebecca, the first quote.
DM me, because I just thought of something. We actually interviewed Omar as well after we read this book, and we did not do any spoilers or anything like that. So you can, if you haven't read it, you can still listen to the interview, and that was an amazing experience as well. Omar is one of the most accessible, kindest, generous people I've talked to. He and Michael Christie kind of have that same vibe, which you kind of feel like they'd be these really high energy, tough guy. I don't know. I just always have this impression. I will have an impression about someone before I talk to them, and it always blows my mind when they completely are different than what I thought. And I kind of think Michael, Christie, and Omar El Akkad are very similar in personality, maybe. Very funny, very calm. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yes, so that I'm going to say that was one of mine as well. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go next because I had
Oh,
this
okay.
one on
Yeah.
my list.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I stole your thunder with that one.
Oh, not at all, because I knew we both had the same one. So
Okay. My next, I've got a nonfiction, The Inconvenient Indian by Thomas King. It just is about, well, it says a curious account of Native people in North America. So it's the history of Indigenous people in North America. It's a beautiful book. It's very informative. You will learn a boatload of stuff. And I have the special illustrated edition here, which is
ooh.
just, yes, which really just kind of ups um, the reading experience. It's a beautiful. I had read the non-illustrated edition I got from the library originally, and then when this came out, I immediately snapped up a copy of the illustrated. I will even show you. So there's the cover of the illustrated edition, which is very cool. And on the inner leaf is a Kent Monkman painting.
Oh.
It's
I would get that edition.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I did not know about that. I didn't
Oh,
know there was like that
no,
edition.
it's
So
fantastic. And I love Thomas King anyways. I read not all of his, but I'm working through his backlist and keeping up. He's quite prolific.
yeah.
And he nonfiction, literary fiction. He has a murder mystery series on the
Oh,
go,
yeah.
which I absolutely adore. He is funny, and that humor comes out in his writing, and that's not an
Yeah.
easy thing to do.
I've only read one of his books, and I feel like I don't think we did a buddy read, but I think there was one that I read of his, but I cannot even remember which one it was now. I just cannot remember. But anyway. Oh, it was something about he was on vacation with
Oh,
his wife.
Indians on Vacation.
Okay, there you go. I practically had the title right there.
Yeah.
I've read that one. Yeah. All right. My next one is I love this book so much. And I was shocked that it made the list. But I love this. It's translated.
Yeah.
Suzanne by Anaïs Barbeau-Lavalette, and it was translated by Rhonda Mullins. It was on Canada Reads one year, and I think it got voted off first. And I don't remember who defended it, and no shade to them at all. But I feel like they totally missed how to defend this book because it's about a woman. A woman is telling the story of her grandmother and how her grandmother had left the family, and her mother basically grew up in I don't remember if it was foster care or whatever, and the grandmother just had no relationship ever at all with the family. And one of the complaints on Canada Reads, which I remember quite well, is that the main character was unlikable. And it was funny too, because it's written in third person. And at the time, that was the last book I read for Canada Reads that year because I didn't really want to read it. I don't really care for third person. And I read it and it needed to be in third person. It was the perfect decision to put it in third person. And I will argue that Suzanne, the main character, is not unlikable if you can really open your heart and your mind to Suzanne. I absolutely love this book. One of my top Canadian titles.
Yeah. I really dislike the criticism that a character is unlikable and therefore someone can't like. I mean, again, like if that's your thing, if you need to have a likable character to
Yeah.
enjoy a book, but I just don't think that makes or breaks a book in
Yeah.
its merit. You know what I mean? In order to vote it off, that it has an
Yeah.
unlikable character. Well, they're unlikable people, but we still don't get rid of them, you know?
Right. And I will say Suzanne is on the surface an unlikable person
Mhm.
because of what she does and how she lives her life. And even by the end, I don't think you can necessarily say, I like Suzanne. I don't think that you can say that. But to vote a book off or exactly
Yeah.
what you're saying, it's like there are unlikable people in the world who have big lives or
Yeah. It doesn't
who
make
have
their
valid
story
lives.
any less legitimate just because they're
Yeah.
unlikable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
So
that.
highly recommend Suzanne if you have not read it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised to see that one on the list too. Like a
Oh,
translated
yeah.
book. I was like, oh, yeah.
Well, it's so funny too because when Jolene sent us the thing, you know, it had like sort of guidelines or whatever, and it said if it's a translated book, put the person who translated it. And so I already knew I was putting Suzanne on there, and I was like, oh, well, that's good because I would have included it anyway. But then I started thinking, maybe, maybe she'll make the list. But I was still kind of shocked that people. I sort of felt like because it got voted off first, and it was just like there was no question it was going off first. It was just not defended in a way that I feel like the defender really got into the whole story. So I felt like there was no question it was going off first. I think everybody knew, but anyway,
Yeah.
I'm still not over it, so it's
I
okay.
can tell.
Exactly.
Okay, my next one. Remembering the Bones by Frances
Mhm.
Atani. I love this book. So this was the first book of hers that I'd read, and it is about an 80-year-old woman whose name is Georgina, and she is on her way to the airport, and she goes off the road, and is lying in a ravine waiting to be saved, to be rescued. And while she's lying there, she is reflecting back on her life. So it's the story of this woman. And I love this book. Holy smokes. Tanya is a beautiful writer anyway. She reminds me a little bit of like Mary Lawson. Like they're quiet stories and she just dives into the characters. And I remember even like when I love a book, I remember where I was when I read that book. And this is not exciting. I was in my backyard sitting on like the little top of the hill in my chair going, oh, book. Loved it. And then the ending was, and I'm not going to spoil anything I want to, but I love the book. So if you haven't read her, you and I read one of her, I think her most recent book together, Talking to Friends or something about, I can't remember now. I can't remember, but I'm going through her backlist and her writing style. I find this one very different from the book, her most recent book. Her last book was the writing style different from that. And then the other books of hers I've read are more like really detailed historical fictions. So very different. So she's quite a writer.
Wow. I don't remember. You must have read that before you and I met
Yeah, I
because,
read this a
yeah,
long time ago.
I didn't know about that title, but I want to read that. That sounds
Yeah,
really, really interesting.
yeah.
So, okay, my next book is again, this is a Canada Reads book that I loved. And if it had been up to me, I never would have picked it up because the style was something that I normally would not have been interested in. A lot of people gave up on it during that year of Canada Reads. I did not, and I loved it. It made my list. Small Game Hunting at the local Howard Gun Club by Megan Gail Coles, who's from Newfoundland. And all I can say for everybody who gave up, try to go back, open your mind, open your heart to it. It's an amazing story. And part of it was there were no quotation marks for dialogue. And I also think there were no chapters, if I remember. I'm like kind of flying through here. Yeah, I don't think there are any chapters. And we interviewed the defender of the book, which I'm afraid I don't remember her name right off the top of my head. She was an influencer, a YouTube influencer, I think. But we talked to her, and I said something about the ending, and she had a different interpretation of the ending, which I love. And that's the thing. You get to the end, and the author leaves it a little bit open for interpretation, but I think that's the beautiful I just think it's a beautiful thing that she did. She gave us this amazing story told in a unique way, and then you get to the end and it gets to fulfill whatever you need it to fulfill, and I loved that about this book.
Yeah, yeah, I did too. I think a lot of people also gave up because she writes with, she's a Newfoundland writer. So it's set in Newfoundland, St. John's, and the characters speak with a Newfoundland accent. And she writes it into her, it's beautiful. Her dialogue is just beautiful. And so it like flows. And I think that a lot of people, if you don't let yourself just kind of go with it and give yourself time and space to get used to it, it just jolted people, not that they couldn't really pick up on it quickly, but you just got to let yourself go with it, which you did. And
Yeah.
she wrote the accent beautifully.
And it's funny too, because after reading it and it took me a little bit of time, and but I told myself I really was committed to reading it. I gave myself that time, exactly what you're saying, to really let it flow and to get the rhythm of it. And it's so funny because I love the show Son of a Critch, and I feel like some of the accent that I hear there on the show, that's what this is. And it sort of kind of feel like it prepared me in a way to be able to love Son of a Critch as much as I do. I love that show.
Yeah. That's also the first book that I saw a trigger warning at the beginning of, right? I think on one of the inner cut pages, she's got like a little trigger warning, which I'd never seen on a book before. And which was needed. There's
yeah. It says warning contains scenes of sexual, physical, and psychological violence. Yeah, you're right. I totally, yeah.
Mm. Good choice. Good choice. So my next book, my second last book, I don't have my copy here because I think I lent it to my mom, and it is Fire Weather. What's the full title? The Making of a Beast by John Valent. Again, not an easy book to read. I told you about it when I was reading it, and you were like, I can't read that. And I'm like, totally understandable. There were times when I wished I wasn't reading it because you spiral. It is all about climate change and the forest fires that are going on world over. Like the first half of the book does a deep dive into the forest fire from 2016, I think, I can't remember the year, that happened in Fort McMurray and just nearly flattened the city. And then the second half goes into the science of climate change and how it's been set up to happen, or how the Industrial Revolution set it up, and how scientists have known for a long time that this is happening and policymakers just aren't listening. So it's not an easy read. It's sad to read. It's hard to read, but I think it's something that we need to be aware of because it's too easy to cover our eyes, like look away from it. So I love the book. I love his writing anyways. Again, writes a lot of nonfiction, and it's great.
Yeah. All right. My last book again is another Canada Reads title. And I love this book so much because it's different. It really stands out because it's different. It talks about a subject that I don't think I'd read yet in Canadian literature. Not that it doesn't exist. I just haven't read it. So if you know of anything in the same style, let me know. But Denison Avenue by Christina Wong. And then if you turn it over, illustrated by Daniel Innes. And one of the things that I love about this book, and I actually read it in an ebook format, and they had it in the ebook format, but this is so much easier. It was confusing to look at it that way, but then obviously you have if you turn it upside down, then you have the text. So, whoops, there we go. Oh, it's hard to see, but anyway, I love this. One of the things I love about it is I've been in that area a lot in Toronto and Kensington Market and Chinatown. And so it felt very familiar to me when I was reading it. And also that subject of gentrification, that is what fascinates me. It's a horrible thing. I remember when I was younger and I was reading about it and I thought, oh, people are going in and they're fixing places up and they're doing this and they're revitalizing areas. What I didn't know when I was much younger was, oh, they're displacing the people who have lived there forever and now making it almost impossible for them to go somewhere else and have a good quality of life, right? So gentrification is a subject that's very that I love to read about. And I absolutely love Denison Avenue. I just love the fact that they did it. They just did it with the illustrations and the text. And the text is not just, as you could see when I opened it up, it's not just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. That book it's almost palpable. You can kind of feel that main character and how she tried to go through her life after loss. And amazing. thought they did a brilliant job. Both of them did a brilliant job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it got voted off too soon. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to keep saying it because I'm not over that one either.
And I'm going to carry your theme along, and you're going to reiterate that for From the Ashes as well, because, right, your first one. If we're
That
going
was
to carry the
traumatic.
books that you love that got voted off too early, we're going to put From the Ashes out there because that book should have won that year.
Should have won.
Travesty.
100%.
Should have won.
Totally agree. Yes. Thanks for reminding me of that. I'd forgotten all my trauma from that. Yeah.
Sorry to remind you, but I'm going to put that there. Although it's won because it's still on the top 10, 20 list of Canada. So it really did win, but should have won officially.
Yeah. I don't even remember what won that year. So, but Jesse's book is still all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. The other book isn't.
Yeah.
Okay. My last book. It's not going to surprise you. And anyone who's been listening to us is not going to be surprised by the author. So it is Mercy Among the Children by David Adams Richards, who is perhaps my favorite Canadian author. I was introduced to his work in university when I was in university. So this would have been like early 90s. And it was the first time that, like, going back to the unlikable characters, that I saw an author write about unlikable characters, but in a sympathetic way, so that I saw the side of them that still they weren't likable, but I could understand. Like, he shines the light on unlikable characters so that you get their motivation, even as you're like cursing at them or really not enjoying what they're doing. He shows you a side of them that are circumstances that brought them to this. And so this is not one of his earliest books. This was like, I think in 2000. But the main character, Sydney, is extremely likable. And I loved him and I fell in love with him and his family. But this book is set in small town New Brunswick, so Miramichi area. And it is populated by unlikable characters that Sydney is constantly having to go up against. And they are against Sydney because he has chosen pacifism as opposed to another in violence. And it broke my heart, and I reread it and it breaks my heart every time. And I love it so much. I love his writing.
That one I definitely want to read, because you and I read something else, kind of did a buddy read of something else, which I don't know.
Marcus Paul, Incidents in the Life of Marcus Paul. I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah. But that one I want to read because you've talked about it many times and it just sounds amazing. So I want to read that one.
Yeah. There we go.
All right.
That's a good list.
Good. So we want to ask you, when you've watched this video, if you would let us know. You don't have to give us top 10. You could. We'd love to see your top 10. Yeah. But if you want to give us a top whatever number, we would love to see it. Make sure go look at, like I said, the list that Lindy and Jolene put together, and even let us know maybe what your number is. That would be kind of fun as well. So, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And happy reading. Keep reading that CanLit and whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.